The day I found out my wife was cheating, I didn't confront her. Instead, I invited her lover's whole family to dinner and exposed them in front of everyone. I know you are wondering what? Yes, I actually did. I never knew I had it in me either. But there is something about betrayal from a trusted heart. It weaves you into a mastermind. My name is Daniel Reed, though most people who know me well just call me Danny. I was never the type to cause a scene, never the man who raised his voice when something went wrong. I built my life on patience, on reading people quietly, and letting my actions speak louder than words. Maybe that's why the night I discovered my wife's betrayal, I didn't explode. I went silent. To everyone else, Laura and I were the picture of a happy marriage. We had the big white house on Oakwood Drive, the kind of place with trimmed hedges and neighbors who waved every morning. Laura loved hosting barbecues in the summer, and I loved standing behind her, flipping steaks, thinking we had it all. People would whisper how lucky I was, how beautiful she looked in her sundresses, how devoted she seemed when she tucked her arm into mine. The truth is, I thought I was lucky too. When we met in college, I was broke and working 2 jobs to pay tuition. She was the girl who believed in me before anyone else did. I still remember the night she stayed up until 3 a.m., helping me practice for a business pitch. She kept me awake with instant coffee and jokes, and when I finally nailed that presentation, she was the first one clapping in the front row. That's the Laura I married. So when the first cracks appeared, I told myself I was imagining things. It started small. Her phone glued to her hand, flipped upside down whenever I walked into the room. The sudden perfume, one I hadn't bought her. A gift from a friend. Late-night yoga classes she never used to take. I brushed it off, because when you trust someone with your whole heart, you don't want to believe they're capable of shattering it. But the universe has a way of ripping the blindfold off, whether you're ready or not. One night, around 2 in the morning, I woke up thirsty and padded into the kitchen. Her phone lit up on the counter, buzzing. The name flashing across the screen made my chest seize. Ryan Collins, the son of my old business partner. Ryan, a smug kid who had grown up with every advantage I had to fight for. I hadn't seen him in years, not since he bragged at a networking event that he was taking over his father's empire. Back then, I let it slide. But seeing his name glowing on my wife's phone, followed by a string of messages I wasn't supposed to see, it broke something inside me. Can't wait till tomorrow night. You looked incredible tonight. Same hotel? I remember gripping the counter until my knuckles whitened. My mind screamed to wake her, to shove the phone in her face and demand answers. But then, something strange happened. My pulse slowed. The anger, the betrayal, it didn't ignite into fire, it hardened into ice, and I realized, screaming at her in the dark would only give her power. If I wanted justice, I had to be smarter. The very next evening, I told Laura I had an early meeting and left the house. Instead, I followed her. Watched as she parked 2 blocks from the downtown hotel, slipping inside like a teenager sneaking past curfew. I saw him meet her at the entrance, his hand on the small of her back, his lips brushing her ear as she laughed the laugh I thought belonged to me. I didn't confront them. I sat in my car, headlights off, and let the betrayal etch itself into my memory. I thought about the nights I worked late to build our future, the house I bought with my own sweat, the loyalty I gave without hesitation. And in that moment, a calm voice inside me said, "Don't fight her fire with fire. Bury her with ice." The next few weeks were a performance. Every morning, I kissed her cheek as if nothing had changed. Every evening, I asked about her yoga class with the same gentle smile. She believed she was fooling me. In reality, I was watching, collecting, calculating. Because here's the thing about Ryan Collins. His family prided themselves on reputation. His father built his empire on honor. His mother paraded their perfect family image. And his sister once told me she couldn't stand liars. They held their name above everything else. And that was the key. One night, as Laura showered, I sat at my desk, staring at their family's holiday card pinned to my bulletin board. Smiling faces, all dressed in matching sweaters, their golden boy Ryan in the center. I realized then, destroying Laura privately would mean nothing. But exposing her and Ryan in front of the people who worshipped his image, that would break them both. I started planning. A dinner party. Harmless on the surface, devastating underneath. I would invite Laura, of course, and Ryan. But most importantly, I would invite Ryan's parents and sister. The perfect audience for the perfect betrayal. Laura never suspected a thing. When I told her I wanted to host a dinner for old friends, she smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "You've always loved playing host, Danny." She had no idea the stage I was building wasn't for celebration. It was for execution. And as I sealed the last invitation with steady hands, I whispered to myself, if she wanted to betray me in the dark, I'll end her under the brightest lights, at my own table. I spent the next week in quiet calculation, moving through our house like a man rehearsing a play that only he knew the ending to. Laura had no idea. She went about her routine, sipping her morning coffee, humming while tidying the kitchen, completely unaware that the stage was being set. I, Daniel, or Danny, as the few who truly knew me called me, watched everything with precision, noticing every detail, storing each small reaction in my mind like ammunition. The dinner wasn't going to be ordinary. I wanted it to be immaculate, deceivingly so. Crystal glasses were polished until they caught the light like diamonds, silverware laid out with surgical precision, the tablecloth crisp and white, candles flanking the centerpiece. It smelled faintly of roasted rosemary chicken, my signature dish, mingling with the subtle sweetness of lemon tarts I had prepared the night before. I walked through the house repeatedly, rearranging chairs, adjusting plates, even testing the wine glasses for the perfect reflection under the chandelier. Every element mattered. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a stage for revelation. Laura, oblivious to the storm about to hit, spent the afternoon fussing over flowers. "Danny, you always make things so perfect," she said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I smiled, placing a hand over hers. "Only the best for my guests," I said casually. I could see the shadow of suspicion flit across her eyes, brief but telling. She didn't question it, and that small hesitation pleased me. Subtle tension was part of the performance. Then came the invitations. I had sent them a week earlier, elegantly written, every word crafted to seem innocuous. Ryan, the smarmy son of my old business partner, RSVP'd with a confident, almost arrogant enthusiasm. His parents, loyal to their reputation, replied promptly. The sister was curious, enthusiastic even. I had chosen the timing carefully. Early evening, when everyone was relaxed but still sharp. When masks of civility were easiest to shatter. By the time the guests began to arrive, the atmosphere was warm, deceptively cozy. The doorbell rang, and Laura's smile faltered slightly as she greeted Ryan at the door. He was smug, dressed as if he were attending a gala rather than a dinner party, his confidence bordering on arrogance. I welcomed him with a handshake that was firm but calm, the kind that said nothing on the surface but carried an unspoken weight. Next came his parents. The father, tall and imposing, with a presence that demanded respect, stepped in first, followed by his mother, a woman whose elegance often veiled sharp judgment. The sister arrived last, vibrant and curious, eyes glinting with the energy of youth. Laura fussed over them, guiding them to the dining room, her nervousness subtle but unmistakable to me. I poured wine, offering it with a calm smile. Every movement was measured. Dinner began with the usual pleasantries, small talk that danced around business updates, mutual acquaintances, and neighborhood gossip. I listened, nodding, asking the right questions, dropping innocuous comments that had hidden double meanings. "So, Ryan, you've been working late these days?" I asked, voice casual, eyes locking with his. "Always on the move, I suppose?" The question sounded ordinary, but the subtext was clear. Everyone noticed the pause in his confident demeanor, and Laura's hand twitched at her wineglass. As the first course was cleared, I continued to weave tension into the conversation. Stories of loyalty, trust, and betrayal were recounted, carefully selected from news articles, mutual friends' experiences, and even subtle anecdotes I had fabricated for effect. Each tale was a psychological nudge, a breadcrumb leading toward the reveal. Laura grew more restless, her laughter now a fraction too high-pitched, her posture stiff. Ryan shifted in his chair, glancing at his parents with a flicker of uncertainty. Then came the first piece of evidence, delivered as an accidental slip. A receipt from a hotel, the exact location and time of their secret meetings, slid from my pocket as I reached for the bread. I murmured, "How strange." I must have dropped this last week. Letting it rest between us on the table. Laura's eyes widened just slightly, while Ryan's face twitched, a brief flash of fear he tried to mask. His mother leaned forward, examining the paper with curiosity, oblivious to its significance for the moment. I let silence sit like a thick velvet curtain, watching as the tension coiled tighter. I didn't rush. Each bite, each sip, each laugh carefully measured to stretch anticipation. Then came the second piece. A photo, seemingly found in the living room, as I pretended to adjust a chair. I held it up casually, commenting, "Funny how memories surface at the strangest times," and allowed it to linger in the center of the table. Faces shifted, Laura's cheeks flushed, Ryan's eyes darted to the floor. By the time dessert arrived, I knew I had them exactly where I wanted. Lemon tarts sat in front of each plate, their brightness a cruel contrast to the darkness I had unleashed. I cleared my throat and addressed the room. "I have something to show you all," I said evenly, voice steady, eyes locking with Laura's. "Evidence of trust, and its violation." I spread the photos and messages on the table in an orderly fashion. Screenshots of texts, hotel receipts, and photographs, all undeniable. The room froze. The air felt thick, almost tangible. Ryan's mother covered her mouth, the shock washing over her in waves. His father's jaw tightened, hands curling into fists, eyes blazing with anger. The sister stood abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor, eyes wide with disbelief and disgust. And Laura. She looked like she had become a ghost. Her lips parted in silent horror, the mask of composure crumbling. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I let them process, letting the weight of truth sink into every corner of that deceptively warm dining room. "I suppose trust is a fragile thing," I said softly, voice even. "And when it's broken, the consequences are unavoidable." Laura's trembling hand reached for mine, her eyes pleading. Ryan tried to interject, stammering excuses that fell flat against the evidence spread like a gauntlet before him. His mother shook her head in disbelief, tears streaming down her face. His father's booming voice shattered the lingering quiet. "You've brought shame on this family." His anger was righteous, yet I watched it unfold with calm precision. The final piece of the evening's performance was the satisfaction of watching their facade crumble. Each reaction, shock, panic, disbelief, was a note in a symphony I had composed in silence over weeks. I had anticipated each twitch, each glance, each whispered plea. And now, they were performing exactly as expected, unaware that the conductor of this performance remained cool and controlled. As the night drew to its climax, I poured myself another glass of wine, sitting back with a serene smile. The table was a tableau of human emotion, raw and unfiltered. Betrayal had been revealed, consequences laid bare, and I remained the calm center, untouchable, yet omnipotent in their eyes. By the time the guests left, the house was quiet once more, but the echo of what had occurred lingered like smoke. I stood in the kitchen, surveying the remnants of the evening, the polished glasses, the crumbs of lemon tart, the faint scent of rosemary. I allowed myself a moment to reflect, a slow, deliberate breath. I hadn't raised my voice, I hadn't made a scene, but I had orchestrated the collapse of lives that thought themselves untouchable. And as I cleaned the table, folding the photos and receipts into a neat stack, I whispered to myself, almost inaudibly, "This is only the beginning." The morning after the dinner, the house felt different, heavy, almost sacred in its silence. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, the evidence from the previous night still neatly stacked in my study. Laura hadn't slept, I could tell, though she pretended otherwise when she appeared in the kitchen, her hair disheveled and her eyes rimmed with red. Ryan's family had left in shock, their anger and disappointment lingering like an invisible weight over our neighborhood, and I allowed myself a small, controlled smile. Laura's voice was quiet, hesitant. "Danny, please, can we talk?" She approached me with that same pleading look, the one I had loved and trusted for years. I didn't flinch. I poured myself a cup of coffee, took a slow sip, and let the silence stretch. Finally, I set it down and said, "There's nothing left to discuss. The trust is gone, and with it, everything else." She recoiled, disbelief flashing across her face. "But, Ryan, Her words faltered as I cut her off, my tone even but sharp. Ryan's fate isn't your concern anymore. It's mine. And in that moment, I revealed the final piece of the puzzle. A detail I had carefully concealed for months, letting it appear as though I had merely orchestrated the dinner for dramatic effect. But the truth was far more potent. With a calm flourish, I slid a set of documents across the kitchen counter. You see, I own controlling shares in the company Ryan works for. Starting Monday, he won't have a job. And that's just the beginning. Laura's lips trembled, and she stepped back, the weight of realization pressing down on her. She hadn't believed I was capable of executing such a calculated plan. Neither had Ryan, apparently, I thought, watching the slow dawning of terror in her eyes. I moved through the house, gathering the small reminders of what had once been ours, photographs, letters, little mementos of affection, and placed them into a neat box. Laura followed me, a silent specter of the woman she used to be. "You're taking everything," she whispered, almost accusatorily. I shook my head, not out of sympathy but for clarity. "Everything we built together? That was never yours alone. You chose to betray it." Her hands trembled as she picked up a photo of us from our early days, smiling, young, innocent. I thought you'd forgive me," she admitted, voice cracking. "I didn't think it would come to this." I looked at her steadily, letting the weight of my gaze communicate what words could not. "Forgiveness isn't a currency you earn by pleading. Actions have consequences, Laura. You broke the rules of trust, and now you must face them." Outside, the neighbors were beginning their morning routines, unaware of the storm that had erupted behind closed doors. Yet I knew news would travel. It always did. By the time our social circle caught wind of the dinner, the whispers would ripple outward, a subtle but potent humiliation. Laura's reputation, carefully curated over years, was now crumbling under the weight of her choices. I paused in the living room, listening as she shuffled behind me, the sound of her feet on the hardwood echoing in the quiet. "Where will I go?" she asked, almost meekly. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I gestured toward the neatly arranged divorce papers I had prepared weeks before the dinner, laying them on the coffee table. "The path forward isn't my concern. It's yours now. And make no mistake, it's yours alone." She looked down at the papers, then back at me, eyes wide with panic and despair. The realization that her comfortable life, the house, the status, the image of perfection she projected, was slipping away with every calculated step I had taken, struck her like a physical blow. I let her feel it fully. Part of the satisfaction of justice is watching it land where it belongs. The hidden power I had been quietly nurturing for months, the investments, the control of Ryan's career, the subtle manipulation of our social circles, was the final layer of my revenge. It wasn't merely exposing them at dinner. It was orchestrating their collapse so that every avenue of pride, influence, and comfort slipped through their fingers. Ryan, whose arrogance had been his shield, would find himself unmoored and helpless. Laura, once confident and untouchable, would navigate a world stripped of the illusions she depended on. And yet, I wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. There was a rhythm to this, an orchestration that mirrored the betrayal she had inflicted. Each reaction, each humiliation, was deliberate, precise, and necessary. I didn't shout. I didn't throw things. I let consequences speak with a clarity that words could never achieve. By mid-morning, the reality of the aftermath settled in. Laura had begun gathering her things, each item packed with trembling hands. Her eyes met mine once, full of unspoken apologies and bitter regret, before she looked away. Outside, the sun glinted off the polished hood of my car parked on the driveway. The same driveway where just days before we had shared laughter, plans, and dreams. That life was over. As she walked out the door, carrying the remnants of her former life, I allowed myself a long exhale. It wasn't a sigh of triumph. It was the quiet satisfaction of inevitability fulfilled. Betrayal had been met with strategy, deception with orchestration, arrogance with precision. And through it all, I had remained Daniel Reed, the man who moved silently, deliberately, and always 3 steps ahead. The final moments of that morning were surreal in their calm. I stood in the now empty dining room, sunlight spilling across the table where the evidence had been laid bare. I ran my hand along the smooth wood, a tactile reminder of control regained, of justice executed. My mind replayed the events of the previous night, the subtle digs, the staged slips, the reactions of shock, disbelief, and despair. Each one a note in a symphony I had composed without raising my voice. And as I poured myself a final cup of coffee, standing alone in the quiet aftermath, I whispered to no one in particular. She thought she'd destroyed me with secrets in the dark, but I ended her with truth in the light. For a moment, I allowed a small, ironic smile. Justice had been served not with anger, not with violence, but with patience, precision, and an understanding that true power lies in anticipation. Betrayal may have forced my hand, but it also revealed the depth of what I was capable of, calm, collected, unstoppable. Outside, the world continued, oblivious to the quiet storm that had passed through our house. And inside, I knew with certainty that the life we once shared, the illusions, the trust, the love, was gone forever. In its place, there remained only the clarity of consequence, the satisfaction of calculated justice, and the knowledge that sometimes the most devastating power is the one hidden in plain sight.